Okay, this is Kelly Fox. Will call the meeting to order. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So we'll take just a brief moment here. Would like to take a moment of silence to remember those public safety professionals that have passed on the line of duty since the last time we were together. All right, thank you. All right, looking at the agenda.
The board meeting, the electronic format for today's meeting is the same as in the past. Going to do a legislative update and a brief administrative update, cover a few things, and then go over anything that you guys want to talk about as well. As you're aware, the two bills that were endorsed by the Left Plan 2 board have both passed out of the House and Senate and have been delivered to the governor. They're awaiting the governor's signature. We have not heard yet when those bills will be scheduled for signing, but when we do, we'll send out notice to all the stakeholder groups and to all the board members. The only other bill that I wanted to mention this morning and talk about briefly has to do with the Senate Bill 6668, merging Left Plan 1 and TERS Plan 1. That bill is not a part of the ongoing budget discussion, and that bill will not be passed this session. However, my understanding is that a study of the merger issue that would involve the Select Committee on Pension Policy and potentially the Left 2 board is still in discussion and may show up in the final budget. One way or another, the word that I'm hearing is that the merger issue is not going to go away, and it will likely reappear in the form of 6668 or some other bill in the next session with work going on this interim. I bring it up only because that is a topic that in the past has created some division among board members and among the stakeholder groups. And so I will keep you informed, especially if there's any requirement in the budget that the Left 2 board study the merger issue this interim. That's going to be something then that we would talk about. If it's in the budget, we'll talk about your preferences on how to move forward with that issue this interim at the April meeting. At this time, I don't want to jinx anything, but I'm cautiously optimistic that there will not be any further special sessions. In fact, I'm hoping that the legislature will be wrapping up their business here within the next week, perhaps. But in any event, at this point in time, we are planning on having the first regular meeting of the interim in April. And at that time, we'll do a legislative recap, but we'll also go over the interim preview. And you have some statutory duties related to rate setting on your agenda for this interim, and some issues that from last session that you deferred to this interim. So we'll go over all of that with you. The plan is right now at the April meeting so that you can begin planning for the interim. Before I jump on to the next piece, are there any questions about the board bills or about merger that you'd like more information on today, or more information prepared for the April meeting?
Okay. I do, Steve.
Yeah.
This is Jason Granneman. I haven't heard anything as far as what the Left 1 folks, where they're standing on this, number one. And then number two is if this merger was to go forward, for as much as I've read, I don't see a direct impact on LEOFF 2. I just want to make sure I'm not mistaken.
No, the LEOFF 1 folks, my understanding is, were unanimously in opposition to Senate Bill 6668. And I should have been more clear. If the study moves forward on merger, I think the concept that was out there was a select committee study on a LEOFF 1 TERS 1 merger, which wouldn't impact LEOFF 2 at all. There were some legislators, however, though, that thought that were considering whether or not a full discussion or consideration of the merger issue next session should also involve a discussion of what would a LEOFF 1, LEOFF 2 merger look like, similar to what was proposed years ago. And that was one of the things apparently that came out in the debate over a LEOFF 1 TERS 1 merger this session. So I think, Jason, if it shows up, the board, as a part of a study, the board would be asked to study a LEOFF 2 LEOFF 1 merger, not the LEOFF 1 TERS 1 merger.
Steve, this is Paul.
Yeah.
As far as the merger plan that they have with merging LEOFF 1 into the PERS 1 system, what indication would you have that they may not consider also sweeping or taking LEOFF 2, because LEOFF 2 is pretty healthy compared to PERS, and including that in the legislation?
Well, that's the kind of stuff that a study would end up discussing. Is there are a number of policy and legal issues that come up with respect to merger, but frankly, the number one driver for legislative interest in merger is how would it create budget savings, and a discussion of the mechanism for how a merger, whether it's a merger with TERS 1 or a merger with LEOFF 2, how that would affect budget savings, is probably the key thing that they're looking at in the study. The LEOFF 1 TERS 1 merger had a savings of $75 million plus in the supplemental budget, according to the actuary's fiscal note, with over $300 million down the road and even more long-term savings. I don't know what a modern, an updated fiscal note would look like for a LEOFF 2, LEOFF 1 merger. Merging an active plan like LEOFF 2 with a plan like, say, TERS 1 wouldn't have the same sort of savings dynamic. The state and all the employers are still contributing to LEOFF Plan 2, and that wouldn't change if it was merged with Teachers Plan 1. The LEOFF 1, because of its funding status and because of its contribution status, is the only plan that anybody is talking about merging with anyone, because that is the only plan where they see the potential to use the actuarial value of LEOFF 1 as an offset for some contribution rate reductions, whether it would be in TERS 1 as in 6668 or in the state's contribution to LEOFF 2 as it was 4 or 5 years ago.
I see. All right. Thank you, Steve.
As far as outreach goes, hasn't been any activity since the last meeting. The Washington State Council of Firefighters has their education seminar coming up later next month. Tammy Harmon as the ombudsman, has been asked to present at that meeting, and I will be attending with her and will be manning the table there. That is in Spokane, I believe. And then with the only other administrative item, you got an email late. Probably you all received an email yesterday with some correspondence from a Left 2 member. Specifically, his letter had to deal with hiring retirees or allowing retirees to continue to work in Left 2. But I bring it up mainly to get a sense from you, not necessarily today, but something that you could think about with respect to April, in terms of how you would like that to be handled. Is this something, the letter was addressed to Chair Fox and members of the board. Up to now, nobody has responded from staff. And if it was your intent to direct us to respond, we would. But it was more getting clarification. Now we've got a lot of new members on the board in terms of how you'd like to have correspondence like this handled in the future. So that was the purpose for making sure that I brought special attention to that letter. It's been a while since we've got that type of correspondence. Typically we'll get emails, but in the past, correspondence that suggested a policy issue to the board is brought to the next board meeting and then discussed at that time in terms of how you'd want to handle it. Now, while the electronic meetings are going on, I don't know if that still works or if that's too long a delay in responding, or if you would at least like a response that would simply say something like, your correspondence has been received, it's been passed on to the board, and it'll be a topic of discussion at the next board meeting, and letting the Left 2 member know when that is. That sound like a good approach for now?
I would say so. Yeah, I think it'd be good to respond to that gentleman just to let him know that his email has been received, so he's not wondering for a month why he's got no correspondence. And it would be good for those of us that are new to maybe bring up some of the points that have been raised in the past year before I was on the board on the challenges with the hire-rehire. Of course, there's the bill that we've discussed. A lot of us are familiar with that. But in his correspondence, he did ask, he said he was 55. He wants to retire and then come back to work for the same agency, I believe he said for 5 years, in order to sort of plug the gap, so to speak, because of the lack of new hires and the challenges with the academy.
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I think a response, not just the acknowledging receipt of the email, but articulating the things that we have discussed on this particular subject probably over the last 5 years at least, I believe, or around that, but let him know that we have had these conversations, and then probably direct him, or Jason, someone like yourself might direct him to his advocacy organizations. I mean, we can only give him the factual information and the discussions, or direct him to our website where there are references to these discussions we've had on these bills. And then, I don't think we haven't taken we have in the past taken a position, and then the bill didn't pass, and we've had disagreement, at least at this board, about what the best direction was. So I think it'd be difficult for the Left Plan 2 board to take a definitive position on the subject matter as he articulates it here. Steve, is that fair to say?
It's certainly fair to ask us to respond, let him know that his correspondence has been received, and direct him to past board discussions, and let him know when the next Left 2 board meeting is, at which point his correspondence would be presented to the board. Whether the board chooses to take action on it at that meeting or any future meeting, that would be up to all of you. And I wouldn't want to speculate on that in a response to the member.
Hey, Steve, I got a question for you here, just to step back up to about 20,000 feet on this issue.
Okay.
We've got, this last session, we had a heck of a push because of the shortage of teachers to allow retired teachers to come back and teach in a substitute capacity here to fill spots that are absolutely just vacant right now, and they're very needed. And we've talked about these issues, having the retire-rehire issues from a lot of different aspects over many years now. Outside of the political consequences of public perception on something like this, and the potential for maybe, I don't know, maybe gaming the system with a drop system kind of an attitude, where did the prohibition against receiving an annuity payment and continuing to work within a system, whether you're contributing to a different system or not contributing at all, where's the genesis of this policy, and why is it so cast that we can't seem to get around this?
Left 2 has had a unique approach to retirees working in and while being members of the left system. All the other system and plans, PERS and teachers in particular, have always had a ability for retirees to come back and work a limited number of hours in a PERS or teaching position. The substitute issue was largely recently driven by a new bill that was passed that put a 0-hour restriction on members returning to work, which has always been the case in Left 2. There's never been a time where Left 2 allowed members, for instance, retired members, to come back to work for, say, 5 months like they could in PERS and TERS. That's been there since '77, so that even predates my time, Jeff. I know that originally that part of that was a belief that Left 2 members, or police and fire employees in particular, the line positions, that working past retirement, having a retirement age similar to the other plans, didn't fit with the work. And to some extent, allowing retirees to come back to work sort of argues the other side of that. Whether conditions have changed, one of the things that I think the debate around the duty-related disability benefits that the board has recommended and that the legislature has adopted for Left Plan 2 over the past several years has been a recognition that the push for, say, early retirement ages was largely being driven by the types of cases that now are covered through duty disabilities. It was always considered, there were some members who physically couldn't work to 60 or 58 or 55. Those members now can generally, if their physical condition is a result of their job, they can go out on duty-related disabilities. And so maybe there is a growing acceptance that more members who aren't suffering from those types of duty-related injuries or illnesses are capable of working beyond 53. Now, whether that means a retire-rehire approach or a change in the retirement age approach, there's a number of different ways you could adjust the plan to recognize those new demographics, if you will. But that would, discussing all those different approaches would be something that we could plan on for this interim. Is that 20,000 level of response for your question, Representative Holy?
It pretty much does. He gets to be there. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, are there any other questions?
No. Hi, Steve. This is Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Sorry, I've been on for 8 minutes. I was about 10 minutes late, so I apologize, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm listening.
Thank you. We'll make sure that the minutes reflect that.
Thank you.
The next meeting, as I mentioned, is in April. And at this point in time, we are planning on that being a regular, not an electronic meeting. Of course, attendance by phone will still be available. And we're trying to figure out whether or not and we'll talk to you about that, but to what extent electronic attendance at regular board meetings is something that you might be interested in, and that technologically we might be able to work on this upcoming interim. So the plan again for April is a regular board meeting with a legislative recap and an interim preview of the statutory responsibilities of the board and the policy issues that you have already indicated you'd like to work on this upcoming interim. Any further comments or questions from any of the board members?
I do, Steve. Just to throw something out for our discussion in April on the hire rehire. Since my appointment to the board, oddly enough, I get a tremendous amount of questions now from people in Southwest Washington, which I know sounds strange. But I would say the number one question that I am getting and concerns of folks that are talking to me that are in the retirement pipeline is, am I going to be able to work another job, and what that looks like. It seems to be on a lot of people's minds, especially since we got the correspondence from the gentleman up north. So I think that it's something that we should talk about in April as far as how we can maybe look at things out differently, or try to establish how we're going to partner with legislators to kind of talk about what Representative Hawley said as far as I'm glad he brought that up, because a lot of people are making direct comparisons to that. They come to me and they say, hey, did you hear about the teachers? And now teachers can come back and work and draw their retirement, and there seems to be disparity among people's minds that, well, if they can do that, why can't we? And there just seems to be a lot of conversation about that, at least in my geographical area. So I just wanted to throw that out there for folks to think about.
Any other questions or comments?
Steve and others, this is David Klein calling in. I agree that this is going to be an issue that's going to continue with us, so I think putting it on our future agendas to see if there's some path forward, as been talked about today, maybe for the next legislative session, would be something that I'd like us to look into as well.
Will do. We'll prepare for April to give all the board members a recap of what has happened at the board up until now, and identify then a path forward in terms of study, getting it on your interim agenda with sufficient discussion so that you can prepare for the upcoming session if that's your will.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Okay, if there's no other business to come before the board, I'll give one last shot for everybody that's here. Thank you again for calling in. If there's nothing more, we will be adjourned. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Moved and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Goodbye.
All right, thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.